She called the cops on me for trying to move out. You heard that right, moving out of my own house. I watched in disbelief as 5 police cars surrounded my property, officers with hands hovering near their weapons. All because Karen Whitmore, the president of our HOA, decided that no one leaves Willowbrook without her explicit approval. But that night, Karen made a crucial error. She had no idea who was sitting in the 5th squad car. What happened next would turn everything upside down. Drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from, because this kind of madness happens in neighborhoods all across America, and trust me, you won't believe what happened next. It all began 6 weeks ago when I got the break of a lifetime. St. Mary's Hospital chain wanted to partner with me to supply them with organic vegetables, an exclusive 5-year contract. It was enough to turn my small farm into something truly worthy of Lisa's dream. My wife, Lisa, had always believed in healing through nutrition. Even 3 years after losing her to cancer, the basil plant she left behind was still green and thriving in our garden. She made me promise to keep growing the healthiest, cleanest produce I could. This contract wasn't just a business deal, it felt like destiny itself. That morning, as the sun rose and glistened on the dew-soaked basil, I almost felt Lisa's laughter in the breeze. I took a deep breath and pounded that for sale sign into my front yard. Almost immediately, Karen Whitmore emerged from her house across the street like a vampire sniffing out fresh blood. At 52, with her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and designer workout clothes she never actually worked out in, Karen ran our hole like a dictator in designer sneakers. "Robert," she called in that sugary sweet voice that always meant trouble was brewing. "You're not seriously thinking of leaving our beautiful neighborhood, are you?" I kept my tone calm and professional, explaining about the hospital contract. She smiled like she always did, but her eyes flickered with something icy and hard. "Well," she said, checking her manicured nails, "moving can be so complicated with all our HOA rules. I do hope you've read Section 12 of our bylaws about property transfers." The truth was, Karen had been holding a grudge ever since I'd beaten her in a small lawsuit 2 years earlier. She'd tried to ban vegetable gardens in front yards, calling them eyesores that would ruin property values. I'd proven her wrong, showing that gardens actually boost property value. Since then, I'd been her #1 enemy, even though she covered it with fake smiles and backhanded comments. What I didn't realize was that my son Nathan had stopped by the day before. He's a police officer in a town 3 hours away. Karen had seen him, noticed his service weapon, and stored that nugget of information in her vengeful little mind. She even snapped photos from her window, though I wouldn't find that out until later. Within hours of putting up the sign, Karen made her first move. A bright orange violation notice appeared on my door, fining me $500 because my delivery truck had been parked in my driveway for more than 2 hours. The rule was buried in subsection 12.3 of the HOA rule as something no one had ever enforced in the decade I'd lived there. I paid it, of course, but not before I recorded our conversation when she came to hand me the fine. "This is only the beginning, Robert," she hissed when she thought I wasn't recording. "I'll make sure you never leave this place. You think you can just walk away from your responsibilities? Think again." Her voice dropped to a whisper that made my skin crawl. "I know people, important people, and they owe me." 2 days later, things escalated even more. The buyer who'd been seriously interested in my house suddenly backed out, saying they had concerns about the property's history. When I pressed the real estate agent for answers, he hesitated, then finally forwarded me an email from Karen. She'd sent it to every single resident in Willowbrook. In that email, she painted me as a deadbeat homeowner trying to dodge countless HOA fines and debts. She even attached a list of 47 supposed violations over the past 5 years, complete with doctored photos and fake evidence. In reality, I'd only had 2 minor infractions, both from my truck during harvest season. Her email was a masterclass in deception, just enough truth to sound real, laced with outright lies. As I read it, each accusation was more ridiculous than the last. I felt something I hadn't felt since Lisa was sick, a wave of pure, helpless fury. Karen was tearing down my chance to build something meaningful and keep Lisa's dream alive. But I remembered Lisa's final words: "Promise me you'll never fight with fists or anger, Robert. Fight with wisdom and patience. That's how good people win." So instead of storming across the street to confront Karen, I sat down at my computer and started gathering evidence via every email, every false accusation, every interaction. If Karen wanted a war, she'd get one, but it would be on my terms. What I didn't know was that Karen had already reached out to someone who owed her a favor, and my troubles were only just beginning. The next morning, the moving company I'd hired called to cancel. Their manager sounded genuinely rattled. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson," he said, "but your HOA president has threatened us with legal action. She says we need special permits to operate in Willowbrook, and she'll sue if we don't comply." They said it would be trespassing if they showed up. I tried to explain to them that there were no such permits required, that it was nothing but Karen's scare tactics, but it was too late. Karen had already driven them off, leaving me to pack up 5 years of memories on my own. As I hung up the phone, I heard a quiet knock at my back door. Maria Rodriguez stood there, glancing nervously over her shoulder. She was a petite woman in her mid-40s, flour still dusting her dark hair from her early morning baking. Maria ran the little bakery on Maple Street and was also on the HOA board, though she'd been notably silent at recent meetings. "Robert, we need to talk," she said in a low voice, clutching a battered notebook to her chest. "But not here. Karen's got Mike watching your house." I'd noticed Mike in the neighborhood lately, always lurking, always observing. He drove an old white van with tinted windows and had the unnerving habit of parking and staring at houses for hours. The way he looked at women especially made everyone's skin crawl. Mrs. Peterson from 2 houses down told me she once caught him rifling through her recycling bin at night, supposedly looking for violations. We all knew better. Mike enjoyed wielding even the tiniest bit of power, particularly the kind that let him meddle in others' lives. I'd recently learned Mike was Karen's new boyfriend, a 48-year-old unemployed veteran she'd been dating for 3 months. What Maria shared next made my blood run cold. She said Karen had pulled this same stunt with 3 other families over the last 3 years, bullying them into selling for cheap. And guess who ended up buying those houses? Karen's younger brother, always under a different LLC name. It was a pattern: harassment, trumped-up violations, intimidation, and then a lowball cash offer when the family was desperate to get out. Maria's voice shook as she told me, "I tried to take her to court 2 years ago after she forced me to close my home bakery. I didn't have enough proof then, but now I do." She opened her notebook, revealing 2 years of careful notes, every bogus fine, every family Karen had targeted, all written in Maria's tidy script. "But Robert, she's getting worse. Last week, she told me if I didn't vote her way on the new budget, she'd burn my bakery down." She said it with a smile, like she was talking about the weather. "My husband's a cop, but even he says we need solid evidence to stop her. Until now, she's always been too careful, too connected. But I think she's finally gone too far." Maria's bravery lit a fire in me. Together, we came up with a plan. I'd keep moving like I wasn't worried, to draw Karen out and make her slip up. Maria would secretly record everything. The very next day, Karen fell right into the trap. She brought in a towing company to haul away my produce truck, claiming it was illegally parked in my own driveway. The tow truck driver got out, took one look at the situation, and burst out laughing. Turned out he was one of my regulars at the farmer's market. "Mr. Thompson," he said, unhooking the truck, "your veggies kept my wife's diabetes in check. There's no way I'm towing you for this crazy woman." Karen's face turned purple with rage as she screamed threats at us both. "You'll pay for this. I'll get your business license revoked. I'll sue you into bankruptcy." That evening, Karen called an emergency home meeting, using her hand-picked board members to push through a new regulation. No homeowner could move out within 90 days of listing their home. Completely illegal, of course, but she had the votes from those too scared or indebted to her. Maria tried to object but was drowned out by shouting. In a stroke of genius, Maria secretly live-streamed the entire meeting to the neighborhood's community page. Within minutes, over 500 people were watching as Karen raged at elderly residents, threatened the board, and flat-out admitted she was targeting me. "Robert Thompson thinks he can just leave? Well, I've got news for him. Nobody leaves Willowbrook without my permission," she ranted, spit flying from her mouth. The comments section exploded. "Is this even legal?" One neighbor typed, "Someone call the police." another demanded. But one comment made everyone pause. Is that a knife in her purse? When Maria panned her phone to Karen's designer bag, there was a clear outline of what looked like a switchblade. The meeting turned to chaos as residents backed away from Karen, who realized she was being broadcast live. She lunged for Maria's phone, but Maria's husband, Sergeant Rodriguez, had trained her well. She kept filming, backing slowly toward the exit and capturing every second of Karen's meltdown. "Turn that off," Karen shrieked. "This is a private meeting. You're breaking HOA privacy rules." The irony of her sudden concern for privacy wasn't lost on anyone. The next morning, I woke up to find my yard destroyed. Someone had spray-painted "Traitor" across my vegetable garden and ripped out dozens of plants I'd been nurturing to transplant to my new farm. The security footage showed it all. Mike Stevens, at 3 o'clock in the morning, destroying my garden while Karen stood in the background directing him like some twisted conductor. But the strangest part? She left a single red rose on my doorstep with a note: "This is what happens to people who betray the community." As I swept up the shattered plants, I couldn't stop thinking about how Lisa would have cried to see her beloved garden ruined. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Maria, urgent and direct. "Robert, you." Maria's message was urgent. "Robert, you need to see this tonight. Come alone." I knew it was risky, but Maria wouldn't have asked if it wasn't critical. Whatever she had uncovered had to be big, maybe even the key to stopping Karen once and for all. That evening, I met her at her bakery after closing time. The scent of fresh bread lingered in the air, but the tension was unmistakable. Maria spread out a stack of papers and files across the flour-dusted counter. 3 months ago, I started seeing patterns in Karen's behavior, she began, her voice calm though her eyes were filled with fear. "Every family she's targeted, every business she's sabotaged, it all follows the same script. First the harassment, then the phony violations, then some crisis that forces them to sell cheap." She paused and looked at me steadily. "But Robert, it goes deeper than just her brother buying up properties." Maria showed me bank records, property deeds, and a network of connections that made my head spin. Karen hadn't just been bullying from Lisa, she had stolen over $150,000 from HOA funds over 4 years, funneling it straight into her brother's real estate deals. She'd set up fake maintenance companies, billed the HOA for work that was never done, and pocketed the money. When homeowners couldn't pay the fines she invented, she'd slap liens on their homes, forcing them into financial ruin. Then her brother would swoop in and buy the property for pennies on the dollar. It was a perfect con, shielded by her position on the HOA board and the fear she inspired. "But why hasn't anyone gone to the authorities?" I asked, even though I suspected the answer. Maria gave a hollow laugh. "Her brother-in-law is the dispatch supervisor at the police department. Every complaint against her mysteriously disappears marked as resolved or lost in the shuffle. She's built a web of favors and threats. People are too scared to stand up to her." The evidence Maria had was damning, but it still wasn't enough to guarantee Karen's downfall. We agreed that I'd keep acting like I was on the ropes, while Maria gathered the final pieces of proof. The next morning, Karen escalated again. She called the health department and claimed I was selling contaminated produce from my garden. When the inspector showed up, I braced myself for the worst. But instead, he looked at my setup and just started laughing. "Mr. Thompson, I buy your tomatoes every week at the farmer's market. My wife says they're the only ones she can eat without getting sick." He gave me a clean bill of health and even bought 10 pounds of vegetables for his family. I watched from my porch as Karen, glaring at us from her window, turned red with rage. But she wasn't done. Karen's next move was even more underhanded. She worked with a so-called authorized HOA utility contractor, which turned out to be another of her shell companies, and had my power and water cut off for emergency maintenance. In the middle of a 95-degree summer day, my house went dark. Without electricity, my automated irrigation system shut down. I stood helplessly as thousands of dollars of carefully cultivated vegetables began to wilt in the heat. The plants Lisa and I had grown from seed, the heirloom varieties we'd saved for years, dying because of one woman's vendetta. Customers from the farmer's market called, panicking about their orders. The contract with the hospital was on the brink of collapse. "Don't worry," I lied through clenched teeth. "Everything's under control." The psychological warfare was wearing me down. I found myself flinching at every sound, double-checking the locks on my doors, dreading what fresh cruelty Karen might unleash. Mike was now parked outside my house around the clock. He claimed to be neighborhood security, but all he did was take pictures of everyone who stopped by to buy produce. Karen spread rumors that I was selling drugs from my garden, trying to poison my reputation and frighten away my customers. Some believed her lies and stopped coming. Others saw through her, but they were too afraid to get involved. The isolation was crushing, like the endless emptiness I'd felt after Lisa died, or when the world felt impossibly hostile and cold. But every time I felt myself slipping, I looked at the basil plant Lisa had nurtured, still green and alive in its pot. She wouldn't have given up, and neither would I. Everything came to a head at the next home meeting. Karen stood before the gathered residents like some self-appointed queen, announcing new emergency measures to protect property values. A broken bar property values. Among her new measures were increased fines for arbitrary violations, mandatory HOA approval for all home sales, and expanded powers for the HOA president to act without needing the board's consent. When Maria tried to speak up, Karen turned on her with venomous intensity. "Sit down, Maria, before I remind everyone about your illegal bakery operation." "Oh, that's right. I already shut that down, didn't I?" The threat was clear: comply or be crushed. But Maria didn't flinch. She stood taller, meeting Karen's glare head-on. "Actually, Karen," she said evenly, "I have something I'd like to share with everyone." Maria pulled out her phone and began reading aloud. "HOA funds missing, fake contractors, families forced out of their home as a broken bar." With each revelation, the room grew more agitated. Karen tried to shut her down, but the crowd erupted in anger. Homeowners began yelling, demanding answers. In desperation, Karen grabbed the microphone and screamed, "This is all lies. Robert Thompson and Maria Rodriguez are conspiring against me because they can't handle strong leadership." But the dam had broken. Years of fear and resentment poured out as neighbor after neighbor rose to share their own stories of Karen's abuse. The meeting descended into chaos. Karen fled the room, but she wasn't finished yet. As she stormed out, she whipped out her phone and snapped, "Mikey, a plan B." That live stream comment that had once tipped us off had given her a new idea. If she couldn't win legally, she'd try to scare us into submission. I didn't know it then, but her next move would endanger lives and expose the full scope of her madness. The morning after the home meeting disaster, I discovered that Mike Stevens had gone from passive surveillance to outright intimidation. He parked his van directly across my driveway, blocking me in, and set up what looked like a military observation post right on my front lawn. When I confronted him, he sneered and flashed a laminated card. "Official HOA security," it read, with Karen's signature beneath. "Mrs. Whitmore hired me to monitor all suspicious activity," he drawled, his breath reeking of stale beer even though it was barely 7 in the morning. "And buddy, everything you do looks suspicious to me." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a man with a restraining order history, hired to stalk a law-abiding resident trying to farm his own land. He kept checking his phone, typing out messages with a smug look that turned my stomach. That afternoon, my son Nathan called. His voice was tight with concern. "Dad, I saw the video from the home meeting. This is getting serious. You need to file a police report." I explained how Karen's brother-in-law ran the dispatch office, how complaints against her always vanished or got buried. "Then come stay with me until this blows over," Nathan pleaded. But I couldn't leave. The hospital contract deadline was looming, my crops were dying without irrigation, and if I abandoned the property, it would hand Karen exactly what she wanted. "Your mother wouldn't have run," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Neither will I." There was a long pause. Then Nathan said softly, "Then let me help. I've got some vacation days saved up." I wanted to refuse, to keep him clear of this mess, but I needed help. I was drowning, and my son was throwing me a lifeline. That night, I sat down to write another letter to Lisa, something I'd done every week since she passed. "My darling," I wrote, "your garden is under siege. The basil you planted still grows strong, but everything else is struggling. I'm trying to be patient like you taught me, but this woman is testing every bit of restraint I have. She's turned our dream into a war zone." I see your face in every tomato plant, hear your laughter in the rustle of corn stalks. How do I fight someone who uses the law as a weapon when all I have are vegetables and memories? I sealed the letter, planning to leave it at her grave on Sunday. I am my way of staying connected to her spirit. Nathan had started the tradition at Lisa's funeral, tucking a letter into her casket, so Mom always knows what's happening, he'd said through his tears. Now, writing to her felt like talking to a silent witness, someone who could still see us through all this madness. Outside, Mike's camera flashed again. He was photographing me through the window, probably trying to catch some fabricated violation. The invasion of privacy was suffocating, but I forced myself to wave at him cheerfully, refusing to give him the reaction he wanted. The next day, the health inspector showed up again, looking embarrassed. "Mr. Thompson, I'm really sorry," he said. "I've been ordered to do a full contamination screening. Someone reported you're using illegal pesticides." Of course, the inspection turned up nothing. I'd been growing organically since before it was trendy. But as we walked around the property, I noticed something odd. Karen had installed new decorative concrete planters in her front yard, lined up in a neat row facing my land. For someone who hated gardens, why the sudden interest in container planting? The answer came later, when I saw Mike during one of his intimidation rounds. He was carefully checking each planter, lingering longer than necessary. Whatever Karen was planning, those planters were part of it. The inspector leaned close, lowering his voice. "You know," he said, glancing warily at the planters, "I've been doing this job for 20 years and I've never seen someone file complaints like these. A broken bar, so many false complaints. There should be real consequences for wasting government resources like this." By Thursday, things had reached a breaking point. My crops had gone without water for almost a week, and half of them were dead. The automated irrigation system I'd poured thousands into sat useless. Customers who had depended on me for years were forced to shop elsewhere. The farmers market organizers called, asking if I was shutting down permanently. The hospital procurement officer left 3 voicemails, each one a fresh blow to Lisa's dream. But the worst part was the isolation. Karen had managed to paint me as a disruptive troublemaker, a threat to the peace of Willowbrook. Neighbors who once waved now avoided my gaze. The loneliness was suffocating. Only Maria still spoke to me, and even then, she was careful, always looking over her shoulder for Karen. "She's scared," Maria whispered one afternoon at the mailbox. "More scared than I've ever seen her. It's like she knows something's about to happen." That same afternoon, I decided to try reasoning with Karen one last time. I walked across the street, ignoring Mike's frantic photography, and knocked on her door. She answered in a silk robe, wineglass in hand. At 3 in the afternoon. "Robert," she purred. "Come to surrender?" I kept my voice calm, channeling Lisa's patience. "Karen, this has gone too far. I'm just trying to move." "Why are you making it so hard?" For a moment, her mask slipped. Her eyes flashed with something dark and bitter. "Because you embarrassed me. You made me look weak with your stupid lawsuit about those gardens. Do you know what people said? That I couldn't even handle one farm Remy, the woman who's run this hoe for 8 years. She paused, straightened her robe, and sneered. "Besides, you're violating the 90-day rule. You can't move." When I pointed out that the rule was illegal and unenforceable, she laughed. "Try me. I've got deeper pockets and better lawyers than you, vegetable man. I've crushed bigger threats than you." That night, unable to sleep in my sweltering house, I sat on the porch, watching Mike pretend to patrol. He was so busy photographing my house that he didn't see the unmarked car that drove by slowly, the driver taking pictures of him instead. I didn't know it then, but Sergeant Rodriguez had been quietly gathering evidence ever since Karen threatened to burn down his wife's bakery. The universe was finally aligning forces against Karen with Maria. She just didn't realize it yet. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Requested time off approved. See you tomorrow, Dad." "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay." I wanted to believe him, but Karen had one more card to ply, her most dangerous yet. That's when Maria sent me the warning that made my blood run cold. "Mike's been asking everyone about your son. He knows Nathan's a cop. Karen's planning something. Be careful." Friday morning dawned with an ominous stillness, the kind that comes before a tornado. By 7, The heat was already stifling, and my house felt like an oven without air conditioning. I was hand-watering what was left of my garden with store-bought water when Karen made her next move. She called the health department again, but this time with a new tactic. The same inspector arrived, looking absolutely furious. "Mr. Thompson," he said, his face red, "I don't know who you've pissed off, but someone just accused you of selling vegetables contaminated with E. coli. They sent an anonymous tipper with photos." He showed me the picturesque, clearly doctored images of my vegetables next to what looked like sewage. "This is harassment," he said, shaking his head. "I'm filing a report with my supervisors about abuse of the health inspection system." He paused and, with a small grin, added, "Also my wife wants to know if you've got any of those heirloom tomatoes left. She's been craving them all week." Even in the midst of this nightmare, that simple moment of kindness nearly broke me. Here was a stranger showing more compassion than neighbors I'd known for years. After the inspector left, happily carrying away 10 pounds of assorted vegetables for his family, I tried calling Nathan to warn him about Mike's investigation. The call went straight to voicemail. I sent a quick text, "Mike Stevens knows you're a police officer, be careful." His response was almost instant. "Already handled, Dad, see you soon." But something felt off. The hair on the back of my neck stood up when I realized Mike's van was no longer parked in its usual spot. Where was he? What was Karen planning now? I had the awful sense that we were nearing some kind of climax, that all of Karen's escalating attacks had been leading to something much bigger. The silence felt like the pause before a predator strikes. By noon, the temperature had hit 98 degrees. My house was a furnace. I was down to my last few gallons of bottled water for the plants, and that's when Karen arrived. She came with her full energy and Mike, plus 3 neighbors she'd obviously bribed with promises of reduced HOA fees. Her smirk was as sour as spoiled milk. "Robert," she announced, her voice loud enough for the entire street to hear, "you're in violation of HOA safety regulations. A house without power or water is uninhabitable. As HOA president, I'm giving you 24 hours to restore real utilities or face immediate eviction proceedings." The 3 neighbors nodded along like bobbleheads, clearly uneasy but either too scared or too greedy to oppose her. One of them, Tom Bradley, at least had the decency to look ashamed. Just last year, I'd helped him build raised garden beds for his disabled wife. Now, here he was, backing the woman who was tearing down everything I'd worked for. Something inside me snapped. 3 years of grief, weeks of harassment, and the death of Lisa's garden all erupted in a single moment of raw, unstoppable emotion. "My wife died of cancer 3 years ago," I shouted, my voice cracking. She was a nurse. She believed in healing through food. Her dying wish was for me to keep growing clean, healthy vegetables. That's all I've tried to do, honor her memory by feeding people good food. And you're destroying it all because of your pride. Tears streamed down my face. And for once, I didn't care. Lisa planted that basil with her own hands, 2 weeks before she died. She could barely stand, but she wanted to leave something growing, something alive. "And you're killing it all because I bruised your ego over a garden ordinance." The words poured out of me like water from a broken dam. Years of pain and helplessness finally finding voice. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch someone you love waste away? To feel powerless as cancer eats them alive? Growing these vegetables was my therapy, my connection to her. And you're taking that away, too. The street had gone silent. Neighbors were stepping out of their houses, drawn by the outburst. Karen's smirk faltered, just for a moment, before hardening into something colder. "Save your sob story for someone who cares," she snapped. "Mental instability is just another violation as far as I'm concerned. Maybe you need professional help instead of playing in the dirt." But Maria had been filming the entire exchange from her car across the street. Within minutes, the video was online with the caption, "HOA President terrorizes widower trying to honor late wife's dying wish." It went viral within hours. Comments poured in from all over the country. Outrage, disbelief, and support. The phrase "Karen Whitmore is evil" started trending locally. Local businesses began taking sides. The hardware store put up a sign, "We support local farmers." The coffee shop announced they were buying my vegetables for their sandwiches. Even the local news picked up the story with the headline, "HOA President accused of terrorizing widower." But the most surprising support came from former HOA board members, people who'd resigned under mysterious circumstances. They started reaching out, sharing stories of Karen's manipulations and threats. My phone rang constantly, reporters wanting interviews, lawyers offering pro bono help, neighbors calling to apologize for their silence. But it was too late for apologies. Karen had pushed me past the breaking point. Nathan arrived that evening, parking down the block to avoid Mike's watchful camera. When he hugged me, 3 years of trying to be strong finally cracked. I sobbed into my son's shoulder, just like I had on the day we buried Lisa. "It's okay, Dad," he whispered. "I'm here now. We're going to fix this." He looked over the dead plants, the damaged irrigation system, the wreckage of everything I'd built. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw his mother's fierce determination in his eyes. "Mom would be so proud of how hard you fought," he said. "Now let me help you finish it." We spent the evening strategizing, but we both felt that sense of being watched. Every car that drove by, every flicker of movement felt like Karen gathering intelligence. Nathan kept checking his phone, his expression darkening with every update. "Dad," he said finally, his voice tense, "something's not right. My colleagues back home are telling me someone's been digging into my record, my assignments, my work history, everything." As darkness fell, we sat on the porch, sharing stories of Lisa and trying to pretend the world wasn't crashing down around us. That's when Karen's car pulled up across the street. She sat there for a full minute, just staring at us, then began typing on her phone. My phone buzzed. Maria's text. "Rodriguez says Karen just called the police. She's claiming there's an armed intruder at your house." Roberta broken bar. She's pointing at Nathan. Before I could even process what was happening, the night exploded with sirens. 5 police cars came screaming down our quiet street, lights flashing, sirens wailing. Officers leapt from their vehicles, weapons drawn and using their cars as cover. A voice boomed from a megaphone. "Armed suspect, come out with your hands where we can see them." Nathan immediately stood, his hands in the air, training taking over. "Dad, stay calm," he murmured, eyes scanning the scene. "Don't make any sudden moves." Spotlights blazed across our porch as officers barked orders, and I realized with a sickening clarity, Karen had played her most dangerous card yet. She'd called the police on my son on Nathan, claiming he was an armed intruder. The lead officer stepped forward, gun trained on Nathan. "Sir, drop your weapon and step away from the homeowner. Do it now." Time slowed to a crawl. 5 officers, guns drawn, surrounded my son, but Nathan stood steady, his voice calm and clear. "I'm Officer Nathan Thompson, badge number 2847, Riverside Police Department. I'm off duty, visiting my father. My service weapon is holstered on my right hip. I'm going to move slowly to show you my ID." The lead officer hesitated, his weapon still raised. "Don't move. We have a report of an armed intruder threatening a homeowner across the street." Karen's shrill voice sliced through the night. "That's him. He's been stalking me. I saw him here yesterday with a gun. He's probably impersonating a cop." Her performance was chillingly good. A trembling voice, crocodile tears, but she'd made a mistake. One of the younger officers recognized Nathan's name, and the absurdity of the scene was almost laughable if it hadn't been so deadly. Here was my son, a decorated officer known for his work with the community, held at gunpoint because of a vindictive woman's lies. Nathan spoke again, voice firm and authoritative. "Sergeant, I understand you are responding to a call, but please verify my identity. Officer David Martinez from your department was my training officer 3 years ago. Call him, he'll confirm everything." A younger officer hesitated, his weapon lowering slightly. The broken bar. "Thompson, aren't you the officer who got the commissioner's commendation last month for the youth outreach program?" Relief flickered across some faces, but the lead officer kept his weapon up, protocol battling with recognition. The tension was suffocating. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't end in tragedy. That's when Sergeant Rodriguez arrived, pulling up in his personal vehicle with the kind of perfect timing that felt like divine intervention. "Stand down," he commanded, stepping out with his badge displayed. "That's Officer Thompson from Riverside. I know him personally." The lead officer finally lowered his weapon, confusion replacing aggression. "Sergeant Rodriguez, what are you doing here?" Rodriguez's eyes swept over the scene, understanding immediately. "Thompson, you can put your hands down." Nathan slowly lowered his arms, his calm never faltering. Rodriguez turned to the lead officer. "Let me guess, an anonymous caller reported an armed intruder?" Karen, realizing the script was slipping away, stormed across the street with Mike in tow. "This is ridiculous!" she shrieked. "He's dangerous, I have proof." But her act was starting to crack. She hadn't anticipated Rodriguez's arrival or that the officers would verify Nathan's identity so quickly. "Why aren't you arresting him?" Karen demanded, her face red with fury. "He's trespassing. He threatened me. I saw him with a gun yesterday." Mike puffed out his chest. "That's right. I've been documenting his suspicious activities for days." Rodriguez turned to Mike, his gaze cold as steel. "Oh, and what exactly is your name, sir?" When Mike identified himself, something shifted in Rodriguez's eyes. "Mike Stevens? Interesting. Aren't you under a restraining order that prohibits you from surveilling or photographing women without consent?" Mike paled, stammering, That's different. Karen hired me at Sajoba." Rodriguez gave a tight, humorless smile. "So you admit to being paid to stalk and harass people?" "That's conspiracy to commit harassment, Mr. Stevens. And violating a restraining order is a criminal offense." The situation was spiraling fast, and Karen's carefully orchestrated smear campaign was turning into a spotlight on her own misdeeds. Nathan pulled out his phone. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I think you should see this." He showed the video Maria had recorded of Karen cutting off the utilities, the home eating meltdown, screenshots of Mike's obsessive surveillance. "There's more," Nathan continued. "Mrs. Whitmore has been systematically harassing my father, illegally disconnecting utilities and preventing him from moving out of the neighborhood." Karen's composure shattered. "You can't do this," she screamed. "I am the HOA president. I have authority here. These people are destroying our community." She turned on the crowd of neighbors, her voice shrill and desperate. "You're all jealous because I have power and you don't. I've kept property values up. I've maintained standards, and this is how you repay me?" Rodriguez's expression was stone. "Mrs. Whitmore, filing a false police report is a serious crime. You knowingly lied about Officer Thompson being an armed intruder." Karen's face contorted. "He's not a real cop. This is all fake. You're all conspiring against me because I'm the only one who cares about this neighborhood. I know important people. You'll all lose your jobs." She swung around wildly, pointing at everyone as if she could erase the truth by sheer force of will. Then she made her final mistake, lunging at Nathan, her hand slapping across his face with a crack that echoed in the night. The world froze. Every officer tensed. Assaulting a police officer, even off-duty, even from another jurisdiction, was a felony. Nathan didn't react beyond a slight step back, his training keeping him composed, but Rodriguez had seen enough. "Karen Whitmore, you're under arrest for assaulting a police officer, filing a false police report, and criminal harassment." As he reached for his handcuffs, Karen turned and tried to run, but her designer heels betrayed her. She stumbled and fell face first into the garden beds Lisa and I had built together, the heirloom tomatoes we'd spent years nurturing. Mike, seeing the tide turn, tried to slip away in the opposite direction, but he tripped over the decorative planters Karen had insisted on, crashing hard onto the concrete. The scene was almost comedic. Two bullies brought down by their own arrogance and the very garden they tried to destroy. As they were led away in separate patrol cars, something glinted in one of Karen's decorative planters. Later, investigators discovered she'd hidden recording devices there, illegally surveilling my property for weeks. But that was just the beginning. Sergeant Rodriguez showed me a document on his phone that changed everything. "Mr. Thompson, we've been investigating Mrs. Whitmore for months," he said. "Your situation finally gave us the evidence we needed, but there was more. This goes way beyond HOA corruption." He showed me a photo that made my blood run cold. An hour later, an FBI agent arrived and pulled me aside. "Mr. Thompson, does this name mean anything to you?" he asked, holding up the same photo. It was of Judge Harold Morrison, and several officers nearby let out low whistles. "He's been under investigation for 18 months, the agent explained. "Real estate fraud, bribery, Racketeering. Karen Whitmore's financial records led us straight to him. She wasn't just embezzling HOA funds, she was part of a much bigger conspiracy manipulating property values across 3 counties. I listened in stunned silence as he continued. Her brother wasn't just a passive beneficiary, he was a frontman for Judge Morrison, who was fixing cases to force foreclosures and distressed sales. We've been building this case carefully, but Karen's arrest tonight gave us the final pieces we needed. The agent's face was grim. Attacking a police officer was the final nail. It was the mistake we needed to bring down the whole operation. The following weeks blurred together with depositions, evidence gathering, and a media frenzy. The story of an HOA president who terrorized a widower and tried to have his police officer son arrested went viral. News vans clogged our street, and neighbors who had once stayed silent now scrambled to share their horror stories about Karen. She threatened to fine me $1,000 for my daughter's chalk drawings, one tearful mother told a reporter. She called it vandalism. Another neighbor revealed that Karen had killed their cat and blamed it on coyotes after they opposed her in a board vote. Each new story was worse than the last. Even Tom Bradley, who had stood beside Karen in her final confrontation, came to my door to apologize. "I'm sorry, Robert," he said. "She promised to waive my late fees if I supported her. I've got medical bills, but that's no excuse for betraying a good neighbor." Maria Rodriguez emerged as the community's hero. Her meticulous documentation over 2 years provided an airtight case against Karen. More than $150,000 in embezzled funds were traced back to Karen's accounts. 37 families filed civil suits for harassment, fraud, and emotional distress. The HOA's insurance company, facing massive liability, forced the entire board to resign. When the community met to elect new leadership, Maria initially refused to run. "I don't want to become what we fought against," she said. But the entire community rose to their feet, applauding and cheering until she finally accepted. Her first act as president was to strike down every one of Karen's petty, abusive rules. The 90-day moving restriction was gone. The garden ban was reversed. Front yard gardens were now encouraged, with a monthly prize for the best one. "We don't need rules to intimidate our neighbors," Maria told the crowd to thunderous applause. "We need rules that protect and support them. From now on, this home exists to build community, not destroy it." Even the 2-hour parking limit for commercial vehicles was extended to 24 hours. It felt like a dictatorship was transforming into a democracy overnight. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years were sharing gardening tips and planning block parties. The culture of fear Karen had nurtured for nearly a decade evaporated like dew under the morning sun. My ruined garden became a community project. Neighbors showed up with watering cans and plants, offering helping hands and warm smiles. Within a week, it was thriving again. Lisa would have loved seeing all of us working together. Tom Bradley even built new raised beds as his way of making amends. "Your wife helped my wife," he said simply. "This is the least I can do." The trials came quickly. Mike Stevens got 18 months for criminal stalking and violating his restraining order. His testimony, in exchange for a lighter sentence, revealed just how far Karen's paranoia and cruelty had reached. She kept detailed files on every resident, hunting for weaknesses to exploit and plotting to force out anyone who dared to oppose her. The neighborhood that had once been full of Karen's fearful supporters watched as the judge delivered a scathing verdict. He called her actions a grotesque abuse of power that had shattered the very concept of community. Karen Whitmore was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for embezzlement, conspiracy, tax evasion, and civil rights violations. The image of her in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed behind her back, replaced her designer wardrobe as the new header photo in countless articles about HOA abuse. The most satisfying part, the judge ordered her to pay full restitution to every victim she'd wronged. The woman who had weaponized fines against others now faced financial ruin herself. As for me, the settlement from the HOA's insurance didn't just cover my movie, it allowed me to expand my vision. The hospital contract was saved. Mary's administration had followed the story and was impressed by my resilience. Anyone who can stand up to that kind of adversity while staying true to their principles is exactly who we want as a partner, the procurement director told me. I used part of the settlement to hire several families who had been displaced by Karen's schemes, giving them fresh starts at my new farm. The woman who tried to destroy my dream of honoring Lisa had, in her twisted way, helped me create something even bigger. We turned it into a community farm, one that not only gave jobs to victims of HOA abuse but also donated fresh produce to local food banks. Nathan helped design the security systems, making sure no one like Karen could ever threaten us again. "Mom would be so proud," he said, watching the first harvest come in. "You didn't just save her gardenia, you multiplied it." 8 months later, standing in my new greenhouse surrounded by thriving plants and grateful employees, Nathan forwarded me an email that made me laugh out loud. Karen had sent a letter from prison written on toilet paper and what looked like crayon. "I will return and reclaim what's mine." Nathan had forwarded it to his FBI contact with a short note, "FYI, seems she hasn't learned her lesson." The agent's reply was perfect. "Thanks, we'll add this to her file for parole review." The laughing emoji at the end said it all. Even federal agents found humor in Karen's delusions. As I looked at Lisa's basil plant now flourishing in a place of honor in the greenhouse, I knew she would have loved this ending. We'd fought back with the patience and wisdom she had taught me, and we'd won justice, community, and the chance to grow something beautiful from the ashes of tyranny. The last time I drove through Willow Brook, I saw gardens in nearly every front yard. Neighbors were chatting over fences, children playing without fear of arbitrary fines. Maria had turned the HOA from a tool of oppression into a true homeowners association. And somewhere in the federal prison, Karen Whitmore was learning how to tend a vegetable garden as part of her work assignment. Sometimes karma has a sense of humor. As Lisa used to say, "What you plant is what you harvest." Karen had planted fear and hatred, and the harvest was hers to reap.